Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a place where the desert meets the dream. You're standing beneath the copper glow of a Mesopotamian dawn, somewhere around the 6th century BCE. The air hums with heat even before the sun clears the horizon, and in the distance, beyond the gleam of baked mud walls and zigzagging canals, you see something that shouldn't exist. Green. So much green that your brain does a double take. Trees, vines, and flowers climb skyward as if the earth itself decided to grow stairs. You blink because you know what you're seeing can't be real. Not here, not in the dust-choked heart of ancient Babylon. And yet, there it is, the Hanging Gardens. A forest built on stone, suspended above the city like a mirage that somehow refused to vanish. Historians will later call it one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But right now, it's just you and the rising heat wondering how on earth anyone keeps that thing alive without Wi-Fi controlled sprinklers. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start walking, sand crunching beneath your sandals. The city of Babylon unfurls before you. Broad avenues lined with brick walls glazed in blue and gold. Lions and dragons marching in frozen relief. The Ishtar Gate looms to your left, a portal of cobalt tiles shimmering like a mirage. You pass beneath it, stepping into the very heart of Nebuchadnezzar's empire. The air smells faintly of baked clay and date syrup. Somewhere, a vendor is already shouting the day's price for fish pulled from the Euphrates, and a donkey brays as if it's too early for this nonsense. You can't help smiling. Some things never change. Ahead, the gardens rise. You tilt your head back, squinting against the sun. Terraces upon terraces, stone vaults stacked high like giant steps, each crowned with greenery spilling over the edges. Palms sway gently in the breeze. Fig trees droop under the weight of ripening fruit. Water glints between the leaves like falling glass. You pause at the base, taking it all in. Imagine building this without cranes, concrete, or even a decent espresso machine. Historians still argue whether King Nebuchadnezzar II built it for his wife Amytis, who missed the misty mountains of Media, or whether the entire thing was a poetic exaggeration copied from older Assyrian tales. But for now, that debate doesn't matter. You're here. You can smell the damp earth and the faint sweetness of jasmine drifting down through the heat. As you begin the climb up a gently sloped ramp, the noise of the city fades behind you. The first level is wide and shaded by tall columns. Between them, broad planters overflow with reeds and wildflowers that sway lazily in the morning breeze. The stone beneath your feet feels cool, the bricks still holding the night's memory. A gardener greets you with a nod, carrying a basket of fresh soil on his shoulder. His tunic is stained with water and clay, and a smear of green decorates his cheek. He looks tired, but there's pride in his eyes, the kind that comes from keeping something miraculous alive day after day. He gestures toward a narrow channel running along the terrace edge. Water gurgles softly, spilling into small basins where lotus blossoms float. You crouch to touch it, surprised by its freshness. The Euphrates lies far below, but somehow this water has climbed the sky. You'll learn later how the Babylonians may have done it, perhaps through a series of chain pumps or bucket lifts, worked tirelessly by teams of laborers and oxen turning great wooden wheels. Some scholars even credit early versions of the Archimedean screw, centuries before Archimedes himself. Historians still argue whether the mechanism was more mechanical ingenuity or sheer manpower, but right now, it just feels like magic. You dip your fingers into the channel, letting the water trickle over your skin. It's surprisingly cold. Somewhere beneath your feet, someone is turning a crank. You imagine the rhythmic creak of wood, the splash of buckets, the endless motion that keeps paradise alive. It's almost meditative, ancient ASMR. As you move higher, you begin to notice small details that make the gardens feel more like a living organism than a monument. Birds dart between the branches, their feathers flashing in the sunlight. A cat, because of course there's a cat, stretches in the shade of a palm and gives you a look that clearly says you're on its property now. The bricks used here aren't ordinary. Archaeologists believe they were waterproofed with layers of bitumen, reeds, and lead sheeting to prevent water from seeping down into the lower levels. Essentially, you're walking on one of history's first examples of green roof engineering. Somewhere, a modern architect is feeling mildly insecure about it. You stop to rest near a fig tree, its broad leaves rustling like whispers. From here, the view stretches across Babylon. The city looks almost unreal. Grids of sun-baked rooftops, temple spires catching the light, and the river slicing through it all like a sheet of silver. You can just make out the distant ziggurat of Etemenanki, said to reach the heavens themselves. The gardener beside you drops his basket and begins to rake the soil around the roots. He hums a low tune, something simple and repetitive. You can't understand the words, but the rhythm feels ancient, older than the bricks themselves. You wonder if songs like this were passed from worker to worker, whispered across generations. Above you, vines spill down from the next terrace. Grapes, maybe, or climbing roses. You reach up to brush one, and a few petals fall into your palm, soft, cool, and impossibly alive in this sun-scorched world. You can almost hear Nebuchadnezzar's voice echoing through time. See what I built for the one who missed her mountains. It's easy to romanticize him here, standing beneath this living architecture. But you remind yourself that it took countless laborers, real people with sore backs and calloused hands, to keep the illusion alive. Every drop of water had to be hauled up, every tree pruned, every cracked stone sealed again. The wonder wasn't just in the design, it was in the daily care. You lean on the stone railing and breathe deeply. The air feels thick with life, soil, water, sap, and the faint tang of mineral brick. A gentle breeze drifts up from the river, carrying the distant call of traders setting out their goods. Somewhere, the city stirs fully awake. You, however, feel the opposite. Your heartbeat slowing, your thoughts loosening, your body settling into that drowsy space between awareness and rest. It's strange how the more vivid this place becomes, the more it begins to dissolve into something dreamlike. Maybe that's the secret of the Hanging Gardens. They were always meant to exist halfway between reality and myth, too perfect for one, too persistent for the other. The gardener glances over, smiles faintly, and says something you don't quite catch. Maybe he's offering you a fig. Maybe he's warning you not to step on the irrigation pipe. Either way, you smile back, content just to be here, to exist for a while inside this impossible bloom of stone and water. A pigeon coos from above, shaking loose a small cascade of petals. They drift down slowly, catching in your hair before tumbling to the ground. You watch them fall, and for a moment, it feels like time itself is moving that gently. You awaken at dawn, the air already warm enough to shimmer. Somewhere below, the Euphrates breathes a faint mist into the rising light, and above you, birds begin their gentle chatter among the vines. You stretch, feeling the stone beneath your mat still cool from the night. For a moment, you forget where you are. Then the scent reminds you. Earth, water, and blooming jasmine. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. You're not visiting anymore. You live here now. Or, at least, you're meant to spend the day as one of its keepers. The city below hasn't quite woken. You can hear faint echoes of clattering pots, the low murmur of merchants preparing for the morning market, and the rhythmic thump, thump of someone pounding grain into flour. Up here, though, everything feels slower. Time itself seems to lag behind, caught in the sleepy haze that floats between night and day. You rise and begin your morning rounds. The terraces are bathed in gold, sunlight spilling through the leaves, glinting off water channels that run in perfect symmetry. Someone has already lifted the first buckets of water for the day. You can hear the wooden gears creak softly in the background. You walk barefoot along a narrow path lined with smooth brick. The surface is damp from the night's condensation, and the occasional droplet falls from a vine above, landing on your arm like a cool whisper. The gardens don't shout for attention, they hum. The sound of trickling water, the soft rustle of palm fronds, the cooing of doves. A living lullaby. A gardener passes by, carrying a bundle of reeds tied with fiber rope. His beard is neatly oiled, his tunic simple, his sandals caked with nud. He nods a greeting, and you fall into step beside him. He doesn't say much. Babylonian mornings, it seems, don't require conversation. Together, you walk toward the eastern terrace, where the light spills most freely. Down below, the king's city is a maze of sun-bleached rooftops and blue-glazed walls. From this height, the famous Ishtar Gate looks like a toy, its lions and dragons barely distinguishable in the haze. The Euphrates glimmers like a bronze ribbon in the distance, threading through fields of date palms and barley. You take a moment to watch the river flow, slow, constant, the silent artery that keeps this desert world alive. Without her, the gardener murmurs, we would all turn to dust. He means the river, of course. Every drop of water in the gardens is borrowed from that steady, glittering stream. You nod, unsure if he expects a reply, and he smiles faintly as if he's heard the same thought from every visitor who ever looked down in awe. You stop at a small patch of herbs, mint, coriander, and a few plants you don't recognize. Their leaves glisten with dew. You kneel, pinch one leaf between your fingers, and bring it to your nose. Sharp, sweet, real. You crush it slightly, and the scent blooms stronger. It's almost intoxicating after the dry heat of Babylon's streets. The gardener kneels beside you, pointing to another plant with yellow flowers. Imported, he says, from far west. They call it saffron. You raise your eyebrows. Saffron? Growing on a rooftop in Babylon? That's bold. He grins at your expression, clearly pleased to have impressed you. The queen likes it, he adds, shrugging as if that explains everything. Historians still argue whether Amytis, the Median queen, ever actually walked these terraces, or if she existed at all outside of legend. But here, in this moment, her influence feels real enough. Every flower that blooms out of place, every seed carried from distant mountains, seems to whisper her name. As you continue your walk, the sun climbs higher, shadows shorten. The damp earth begins to release its scent in waves of warmth. You hear the splash of water from the upper levels. Someone is washing down the stones, keeping them from drying and cracking. The sound echoes softly, blending with the faint hum of morning insects. You stop beneath a palm tree whose leaves spread like green fans. The gardener takes a curved knife from his belt and slices through a heavy cluster of dates, lowering them gently into a woven basket. For the workers, he says, setting them aside. He gestures for you to try one. You bite into the fruit. It's soft and sweet, the kind of sweetness that doesn't shout but lingers, like the memory of sunlight after you've gone indoors. You chew slowly, savoring it as a drop of syrup runs down your wrist. Not bad for breakfast, you murmur. The gardener laughs quietly. Better than barley mush, he agrees. You both sit for a moment in the patchy shade, watching a small lizard scurry across the path. Its scales catch the light like tiny coins. It pauses, flicks its tongue, then vanishes between two stones. You can't help thinking the lizard has the right idea. This garden must be paradise for creatures that can fit between the roots. How do they manage pests here? Surely insects would love this green buffet. The gardener seems to read your face. We have birds, he says simply. And indeed, you notice a few sparrows darting in and out of the vines, snapping at unseen bugs midair. A natural pest control system, ancient eco-engineering at work. The sun climbs higher. You start to feel its weight on your skin, a soft but insistent warmth pressing down. You wipe a bead of sweat from your temple. The gardener takes a clay jar from a shaded alcove and pours a trickle of cool water over your hands. You rinse your face, and the chill jolts you awake again. He tells you that mornings are for water, the most sacred task of all. Every plant must be given just enough to live, but not drown. Too much, and the weight of it might crack the bricks beneath. Too little, and the leaves will brown by midday. Balance, always balance. You realize how fragile this paradise really is. You follow him as he adjusts a small clay plug in the irrigation channel. Water shifts direction, flowing toward a patch of young olive trees. The stream is narrow, precise, obedient to gravity and the gardener's hand. Each terrace feeds the one below, he explains. When the top is full, it blesses the next. You like that phrasing, it blesses the next. It's more than plumbing, it's philosophy. A quirky fact you recall drifts into your mind. Babylonian gardeners sometimes used crushed date pits and ash as fertilizer. Primitive compost, sure, but effective enough to keep the soil rich. You glance at the ground, noticing faint black specks among the dirt, and smile. Some things never change. Compost will always smell faintly of optimism. By mid-morning, the air has turned heavy. The gardener leads you toward a shaded archway draped with hanging vines. A faint breeze passes through, and you feel immediate relief. Inside the arch is a small pool, a mirror of still water fed by a hidden pipe. The surface trembles slightly, catching the reflection of the leaves above. You dip your fingers in again. Cool, clean, perfect. You sit beside the pool, listening to the garden's heartbeat, the steady whisper of water, the chirp of hidden crickets, the soft groan of wooden beams settling in the sun. You can't help imagining the countless mornings that began just like this, long before your time. Generations of workers, all tending this impossible oasis, keeping it alive long after the stories of its creators faded into legend. You look up at the terraces above, layer upon layer of life stacked against the sky. Somewhere near the top, you imagine the queen herself, strolling barefoot through the vines, longing for the mountains of her homeland. You wonder if she ever felt what you're feeling now, that quiet sense of peace that comes when the world finally stops trying to impress you and simply exists. A bell sounds from below, a deep, resonant tone echoing through the stone corridors. The gardener rises, brushing dust from his tunic. "The king's procession," he mutters. "We make ready." He hands you a damp cloth to wipe your hands, then disappears into the maze of green. You stay seated by the pool, watching ripples spread and fade. The air thickens with the scent of lotus and palm resin. Somewhere, a bird calls, soft and distant. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the warmth of the morning settle over you. The sound of water fades into the rhythm of your breath, and for a long moment, you can't tell whether you're awake or already drifting into another dream. You rise slowly, leaving behind the pool's soft reflections and the fading echo of the morning bell. The light has shifted now, no longer gold, but white and full, spilling from a sky so bright it seems to hum. The heat presses gently against your shoulders, but the air here, higher on the terraces, carries a subtle coolness that feels almost miraculous. You follow a winding path upward, one lined with woven baskets, clay jars, and the faint scent of damp soil baking in the sun. As you climb, the gardens unfold above you like a green staircase to nowhere. Terraces layer upon terraces, each one slightly smaller, slightly more lush than the last. From below, the structure looked impressive. Now, from within, it feels infinite. You trail your fingers along the wall as you walk. The bricks are warm, smooth with age, and faintly sticky with bitumen. Somewhere behind them, you know, runs a network of hollow channels carrying water upward. The sound of trickling fills the air, soft but constant, like the breathing of a sleeping creature. Every few paces, you pass a small fountain, some simple, others carved with reliefs of lions and flowers. The water pours from their mouths into basins lined with polished stone, cool and dark like obsidian. You pause at one and scoop a handful to your face. It smells faintly of clay and cedar resin, and it tastes of dust and sweetness, a reminder that this liquid began its journey in the wide brown sweep of the Euphrates below. You glance upward and see a network of hanging vines, thick as ropes, draping down from the terrace above. Sunlight filters through them in thin beams, shifting with every breeze. The air here feels heavier with life. The hum of bees somewhere in the jasmine, the slow groan of branches weighed with fruit. You stop beneath a broad-leaved fig tree where a young gardener crouches, his hands buried deep in the soil. He looks up briefly, squinting through the light, and smiles in recognition before returning to his task. You step closer, watching as he carefully breaks apart the dry clumps, then presses his palm flat against the dirt, testing its dampness like a baker feeling for perfect dough. "Too dry?" you ask. "Not yet," he replies, his accent soft but rhythmic. "By noon, yes. For now, just right." You crouch beside him, brushing your hand across the ground. The soil feels alive, granular and cool, mixed with crushed reeds and the faint grit of sand. "What's in it?" you ask, genuinely curious. He looks up with a grin. "Secrets," he says, and laughs. Then, after a moment, he relents. "River silt, mostly. We trade for it. Heavy, rich. We mix it with ground date pits, palm fibers, sometimes goat manure. Babylon does not make good soil by itself. We must borrow life from the river." You nod, remembering the endless dust of the plain below. To build a garden like this here, above a desert, means waging a quiet war against nature every single day. As he continues working, he hums under his breath. The tune is simple, maybe the same melody passed from gardener to gardener. You listen as you wander farther along the terrace, your sandals brushing against low planters filled with flowering herbs. Tiny blue blossoms nod in the sunlight, their scent soft and unfamiliar. You lean down to smell one and catch a faint aroma of honey and smoke. "Hyssop," the gardener calls from behind you without even looking up. "Good for the temples, keeps the air clean." Historians still argue whether the Babylonians truly cultivated such delicate flora in the gardens, or if later Greek writers embellished the tale to impress their audiences. Some even claim the terraces might have belonged not to Babylon at all, but to the Assyrian city of Nineveh, hundreds of miles to the north. But as you stand here, hyssop in your hand, the debate feels irrelevant. Whatever this place is, or was, it breathes, and that is enough. You continue upward. The path grows narrower, the walls closer, the air cooler. You can hear water rushing somewhere nearby, deeper now, a hidden artery feeding the greenery above. You follow the sound until you come to an archway draped with hanging ivy. Inside, the space opens into a small courtyard, and at its center, an elevated pool overflows in a constant trickle. This, you realize, must be part of the irrigation system. A fountain in appearance, but in truth, a reservoir, a carefully measured node in the grand choreography of water. It spills slowly over the edge into narrow channels carved into the stone, each leading outward toward the plants that depend on it. You sit beside it, watching the ripples dance. A small clay tablet rests nearby, etched with lines of cuneiform. You can't read it, but you imagine it might be a maintenance record, or perhaps a prayer to the river god Ea, protector of fresh waters. The Babylonians loved a good multitasking symbol. Why separate the sacred from the practical when both can live in the same stream? You trail your hand through the pool. Beneath the surface, the water shivers, catching sunlight that filters through the leaves above. You can almost see the reflection of the terraces stacked endlessly upward, a green labyrinth twisting toward the sky. A soft laugh startles you from your thoughts. Two women in light linen dresses walk past, carrying small clay pitchers balanced gracefully on their shoulders. They nod politely as they pass. The smell of crushed herbs trails after them. You realize they're likely palace attendants, perhaps tasked with bringing fresh water to the royal quarters hidden somewhere among the terraces. The path they take winds upward still, and curiosity pulls you along. The higher you climb, the more intricate the architecture becomes. Columns rise from pools of shadow, painted with faint remnants of blue and ochre. Birds nest in the cracks between bricks. The hum of life here is constant but never loud, a quiet chorus of motion, the sigh of leaves, the rhythmic creak of ropes far below. You reach a landing and turn to look back. The view nearly takes your breath away. From here, the entire city of Babylon sprawls beneath you like a map. The streets form neat grids, the temples rise like teeth of stone, and beyond it all, the horizon blurs into sand and heat. The river cuts through it in smooth silver arcs. You can just make out the silhouettes of boats gliding slowly, their sails taut with morning wind. It's easy to imagine how this view must have looked to a homesick queen, the nearest mountains invisible beyond the endless plain. Maybe that's why Nebuchadnezzar built this green illusion, to give her something to look at that reminded her of home. Or maybe he simply wanted to prove that he could conquer not only kingdoms, but the desert itself. Historians still argue about his true motivation, but standing here, surrounded by the hush of leaves and water, you think it might have been both, love and ego woven together in stone. You lean against the railing. The stone feels warm and solid beneath your palms, but the plants growing over it give the impression of fragility. Vines gripping, roots searching, petals trembling in the faint breeze. A bee lands near your hand, examines you briefly, and then buzzes off toward a patch of lilies. You chuckle softly. Even in paradise, you're not the main character. A gardener below calls out something you can't make out, and laughter follows. You smile, the sound blending with the soft hiss of water. There's a rhythm to this place, an unhurried pulse that refuses to match the urgency of human ambition. You realize that if the world above the gardens is about noise, dust, and power, then this suspended Eden is about patience. You start walking again, slower this time. Your footsteps echo faintly, and the sound of dripping water fills the silence that follows. Each step takes you deeper into the living maze, where the air smells of earth and fruit and the faint sweetness of decay, the cycle that feeds everything green. At one point, you pass a cluster of white lilies growing from a clay pot half sunk into the ground. Their petals shimmer faintly in the heat, open and unbothered. You pause to watch a drop of water slide down one petal and fall to the soil below. The moment is so ordinary, so unremarkable, that it feels sacred. Maybe that's the real wonder, not the height of the terraces or the genius of their design, but the quiet persistence of things that grow where they shouldn't. As the wind shifts, you catch the faint scent of cedar oil and smoke from incense burning somewhere above. The day stretches on, and with it, the endless labor of keeping paradise alive. You tilt your head back toward the sun, letting the light paint warmth across your face, and for a brief moment, it feels like the entire world has stopped to breathe with you. You follow the sound of water, the quiet murmur that threads its way through every level of the gardens. It grows louder as you ascend another ramp, curving around a wall draped with ivy. The air here feels different, damp, heavier, filled with that rich, metallic scent of running water meeting sun-warmed stone. It's strange to think that this entire paradise depends on what you're about to see, the machinery that moves rivers up into the sky. You reach a terrace where the hum turns mechanical, rhythmic. Ahead, tucked into a shaded alcove between massive columns, stands the heart of the gardens, a water-lifting contraption unlike anything you've seen before. Wooden wheels turn slowly, creaking under the weight of clay buckets that move in a continuous loop. Each one dips into a sunken reservoir below, vanishes for a heartbeat, then reappears dripping and full, spilling its precious cargo into an elevated trough that feeds the terraces above. The gardener beside you, older now, perhaps the master of this place, rests a hand against one of the great beams. "We call it the river's ladder," he says. His voice carries the rough rasp of age and years of desert dust. Without it, everything dries, even dreams. You stand in awe, watching the movement. The entire machine seems alive, wood groaning, ropes stretching, water splashing softly as it climbs bit by bit toward the sky. The laborers turning the crank move with slow, practiced rhythm. Their muscles gleam with sweat in the dappled light, and the sound of their breathing merges with the creak of the wheels until you can't tell one from the other. Historians still argue whether this was truly the invention of the screw lift or something more primitive, a chain of buckets pulled by oxen perhaps. Some credit Archimedes centuries later. Others say the Babylonians had already mastered the art of defying gravity. You stand here, halfway between the theories, and decide it doesn't matter who claimed it first. What matters is that it works. Water rises, life continues. You step closer, careful not to slip on the damp stone. The air around the device is cool and misty, tiny droplets clinging to your skin. It feels almost modern, the same kind of moisture you'd feel standing near a fountain in a city park. Except here, the fountain keeps an empire alive. The master gardener gestures for you to peer into the trough. Inside, the water gleams like molten glass, moving fast and steady along narrow channels lined with brick. From here, it splits into a dozen smaller streams, each diverted by small clay gates controlled by hand. He pulls one lever, and you watch as the water diverts toward the next terrace, cascading gently down a carved stone chute. "Every drop is counted," he says quietly. "Every drop has a destination." He shows you how to tell when a channel is balanced, when the sound of its flow deepens into that low, even murmur that means the water's weight is just right. Too shallow, and the plants thirst. Too deep, and the roots rot. He taps his ear and smiles. "The garden speaks," he says. "You learn to listen." You crouch beside the chute, watching the current rush by. The light catches tiny bits of sand swirling in the flow, sparkling like gold dust. The water races down toward a lower terrace, where you can see workers waiting with woven baskets, ready to redirect it through smaller channels towards beds of papyrus and reeds. It's mesmerizing, the silent coordination, the rhythm of hands and water, as if the entire garden breathes through teamwork. A stray thought drifts into your mind. A fringe theory you once heard that the entire hanging gardens were not just decoration, but part of a complex hydraulic experiment, a way for the Babylonians to study how to move water through cities. Maybe the whole thing was less love letter, more laboratory. You smile at the idea. It feels appropriately human to disguise engineering as romance and call it art. The master gardener takes a seat on a nearby ledge, wiping his hands on his tunic. "Sometimes," he says, "I think the garden loves the noise. The water, the wheels, the work. It sleeps when it's quiet, and we have to wake it each morning." He chuckles, then adds dryly, "Like my nephew." You laugh, and the sound echoes lightly through the stone corridors. He gestures for you to follow him farther along the terrace. Here you find more evidence of human ingenuity hidden in beauty. Thin bronze pipes that glint beneath the leaves, carrying overflow from one channel to another. Carved drains disguised as lotus petals, and, in one corner, a slanted slab designed to collect dew overnight. Every detail here feels intentional. You realize this garden isn't just an act of devotion. It's a study in control, a constant negotiation with nature that demands equal parts respect and stubbornness. The gardener stops beside a low wall and points outward. Below, the Euphrates glints like a blade in the sunlight. "The water climbs from there," he says softly. "Always climbing, always falling, like men." You watch as a gust of wind stirs the surface of the river, sending ripples of light dancing across the stone. The sight makes you dizzy for a moment. Up here, surrounded by greenery and sound, it's easy to forget that the world below is still mostly dust and heat. The garden's illusion is complete, an oasis suspended in defiance of gravity and common sense. A young boy, no more than 10, appears from behind a column carrying a jug almost too heavy for him. He grins shyly as he passes, his bare feet slapping softly against the wet brick. The master gardener watches him go and says, "We start them young. Water must never stop moving. If it stops, it dies. We all do." You follow him toward another section where sunlight filters through woven reeds overhead, casting shifting patterns on the ground. A narrow channel cuts across the path, water flowing lazily through it. You step over carefully, catching a glimpse of small fish, silver flashes darting in the current. You blink in surprise. Fish? The gardener notices your expression and laughs. Yes, we keep them in the channels. They eat the mosquitoes. Sometimes they disappear when a cat gets clever. He shrugs. Circle of life. It's an oddly modern solution. Ancient pest control by aquatic roommates. You can't help but smile at the thought of Babylonian engineers proudly explaining their mosquito strategy at a royal banquet. As you walk farther, you begin to notice the subtle layers of sound, the deeper roar of water from the main lift below, the trickling of channels, the whisper of leaves. It forms a soft, continuous melody that seems to anchor the entire garden. You imagine falling asleep to it, lulled by the rhythm of moving water and the cool scent of damp earth. You think of how the workers must feel when night comes, bones tired but spirits soothed, their bodies echoing the slow churn of the river. The master gardener pauses beside a wall carved with faded reliefs of flowers and rivers. This, he says, tracing one with his finger, was built by men who wanted to reach heaven with brick. They learned it was easier to bring heaven down instead. He means the garden, of course, this strange, impossible meeting of earth and sky. You sit together on the wall's edge, sharing a few slices of dried fig from his pouch. The sweetness sticks to your teeth. Below, the sunlight hits the water just right, scattering reflections across the leaves like tiny flames. You feel the day settling around you, a stillness that's both peaceful and humbling. The gardener stands, brushing crumbs from his hands. Come, he says, you should see how it feeds the next terrace. You follow him to the edge, where the channel narrows into a spillway that carries the overflow downward. The water gleams like molten glass as it falls in a thin, steady sheet, catching rainbows in the sun. Below, it strikes a basin carved into stone, then flows onward, repeating the process terrace by terrace, an endless, graceful descent. You stand there for a long time, watching the cascade. The sound is soothing, hypnotic. You imagine it running endlessly, long after you've left. Centuries passing, empires falling, and still the water flowing, rising and falling, defying time itself. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. The sound fills you, steady and eternal. The river's ladder, whispering upward. The garden breathing. The world turning, quietly, without hurry. The day has grown warmer. The air presses down with that golden heaviness particular to Mesopotamia, where sunlight feels like a solid thing, wrapping itself around your shoulders and settling into the stones. Yet here, in the heart of the gardens, the heat softens. The walls hold the shade, and the leaves above ripple gently, creating dappled patterns that shift like water over your skin. This is the hour of tending. You find yourself beside the gardeners again, those quiet stewards who keep the miracle alive. There are perhaps 24 of them scattered across the terrace, men and women both, moving with the steady rhythm of people who know every inch of their domain. Their tools are simple: wooden spades, curved knives for trimming, clay pots filled with fertilizer made from crushed reeds and river silt. Nothing here looks grand, but you realize as you watch them work that this simplicity is what holds the grandeur together. One of the gardeners, her face lined and sunburnt, her arms sinewy from years of lifting, hands you a shallow wicker basket. Inside it rests a pile of dry, pale leaves and a few broken twigs. "Dead matter," she says softly, her voice half whisper, half song. "We take it before it steals from the living." You nod and kneel beside her. Together you comb through a patch of mint and myrtle, removing what's browned or brittle. She shows you how to do it properly. Fingers careful but confident, pinching just below the node so that the new shoots will grow stronger. The motion becomes almost meditative. Pluck, collect, breathe, repeat. The smell of the crushed herbs clings to your fingertips, sharp and fresh. Somewhere above, a dove coos lazily. The sound of trickling water keeps time with your movements. You realize how easy it is to lose yourself in this rhythm. You forget the towering brick beneath, the stories of kings and queens, the machinery of myth. For a little while, there is only this: hands in soil, leaves against skin, sunlight shifting through green. When the basket is full, the gardener rises and empties it into a compost pit at the edge of the terrace. Steam rises faintly from the dark heap, and you can smell the slow transformation, decay becoming nourishment. "Nothing wasted," she murmurs. "The garden eats its past." She points toward a line of palm trees whose fronds glint in the sunlight. "Those we water last," she says. "They remember drought. They can wait." You watch as other gardeners move among the palms, each one carrying a clay jar that drips water through small holes in its base, a kind of ancient irrigation by patience. They set the jars among the roots, and the water seeps out gradually, grain by grain, hour by hour. Nothing rushes here. Even the watering is deliberate, as though the plants are being taught to grow slowly, thoughtfully. In another corner, a young apprentice crouches over a bed of lilies. His task is brushing the dust from their leaves. He uses a bundle of soft reeds bound together with twine, moving gently so as not to tear the delicate petals. When he finishes, the leaves gleam like polished bronze in the sunlight. He grins with quiet pride before moving on to the next patch. You approach a narrow walkway lined with date palms. A man is trimming their fronds with a curved bronze blade. Each cut makes a low, dry whisper. "Too many leaves," he says without looking up, "and they steal breath from the fruit." He gestures for you to step closer. "See, here, this cluster, ready soon." You look where he points and see the hanging strands of dates, still green and hard. The thought of them ripening here, so high above the desert, fed by an invisible river, feels almost miraculous. You imagine the sweetness they'll hold, condensed sunlight from a sky that otherwise burns. The gardener hands you the bronze knife, its handle worn smooth from years of use. "Try," he says. You hesitate, then reach up and slice through one dry frond. The sound it makes, clean, papery, satisfies something in you. He nods approvingly. "Good. You cut like someone who listens first." You continue down the terrace. Around you, the quiet work continues, pruning vines, scraping algae from the water channels, rearranging stones that the night's wind had shifted. The gardeners move mostly in silence, their gestures so practiced that words seem unnecessary. Occasionally one hums a tune, low, repetitive, hypnotic. You find yourself matching your breath to it without realizing. A small cat winds its way between the rows of plants, tail high, nose twitching. The gardeners ignore it. You follow its path for a moment and find it pausing beside a cluster of tall reeds. Inside the stalks, a tiny frog croaks, half hidden in shade. The cat watches, unbothered. The frog croaks again, a sound like dripping water. You smile. Even here, amid brick and engineering, life finds its small chaos. One of the older gardeners catches your gaze. "The king thinks this garden is for the queen," he says, smiling faintly. "But really, it is for them." He gestures toward the frog, the cat, the hovering insects glittering in sunlight. They make it whole. You sit beside him on a low wall, and he begins to clean his tools, a ritual as careful as any prayer. He dips the bronze knife into a bowl of water, wipes it dry with a strip of linen, and sets it aside. "Every blade must rest clean," he says, "otherwise it carries disease from one plant to another." His tone is not that of superstition, but science, knowledge passed down through observation, through quiet repetition. You realize that these gardeners are as much scholars as laborers, keepers of wisdom about soil, shade, and life itself. He gestures toward the rows of herbs, basil, coriander, dill, and strange desert species you can't name. Each one has its hour, he explains. The sun gives, but it also takes. So we prune in morning and water in twilight. The plants remember the rhythm. It occurs to you that the entire garden has its own sense of time, separate from the city below. Here, time is measured not in minutes, but in moisture, in the cycle of leaf and root, wilt and bloom. You wonder if the gardeners ever feel the passing of years, or if they too have become part of this timeless system. By midday, the light has turned fierce again. The gardeners retreat to a shaded alcove, and you join them. Someone passes around a jug of cool water mixed with crushed mint. It tastes of earth and sweetness. They eat flatbread and dates, speaking softly, as if the plants might listen. One woman tells a story about how, years ago, a young palm refused to bear fruit until she began singing to it each morning. She swears the tree bent its trunk toward her voice. No one laughs, they nod, as though this is simply the way of things. After the meal, they rest briefly. Some nap in the shade, hats pulled over their eyes. Others continue tending in quiet corners, unable to stay still. The air hums with insects. A breeze stirs the leaves, and for a moment, the garden feels like it's breathing again, slowly, evenly, the way living things do when they're content. You rise and wander toward the terrace edge. Below, you can see more levels stacked like dreams, each with its own small ecosystem, each dependent on the one above. Somewhere down there, the water you saw earlier now nourishes papyrus beds and fig trees. It's a chain of care, each gardener part of a silent choreography that keeps the miracle alive. A voice calls softly behind you. It's the woman from before, holding another basket. "Come," she says, "we're turning the soil for the new seedlings." You follow her to a plot where the earth is darker, richer. Together, you kneel and begin loosening the top layer, your fingers sinking into cool dampness. The smell of soil rises, deep and comforting. She scatters tiny seeds, barely visible, and covers them with a thin veil of silt. "Now," she says, smiling, "we wait. The waiting is part of the work." You sit back on your heels, gazing at the empty bed that will soon be green. The thought fills you with quiet satisfaction. You realize that, for the gardeners, tending the plants isn't simply duty, it's communion. Each act, no matter how small, ties them to the living world in a way words can't describe. As the day draws on, the sounds of labor fade. The last buckets of water are poured, the tools are cleaned, and the gardeners begin to leave in pairs, voices low and easy. You stay a moment longer, sitting beside the mint bed where you began. The air smells of crushed herbs and sun-warmed clay. Somewhere below, the water still flows, the endless heartbeat of the garden. You close your eyes and listen. For a moment, you feel as though you're part of the rhythm too, breathing with the plants, the soil, and the quiet persistence of human hands that have tended them for centuries. And as you sit there, a stray thought crosses your mind. Perhaps paradise has always been less about perfection and more about care. The next morning arrives quietly, as if the world itself is still half asleep. You wake to the scent of damp soil and faint jasmine, the kind of fragrance that only appears before the sun climbs too high. From somewhere below, you hear the soft splash of water being lifted, the start of another day in the endless rhythm of the hanging gardens. You stretch, shake the dust from your tunic, and watch as the gardeners begin their morning ritual. There's no shouting, no rush, just movement that flows like the river that feeds them. Buckets rise, ropes creak, and the first trickles of water glimmer down the channels, catching the pale light of dawn. You step onto the terrace and feel the stones still cool beneath your feet. The world below is waking. The faint clatter of merchants preparing stalls, the bray of donkeys, the faraway cry of a temple priest greeting the sun god Shamash. But up here, the sounds feel softened, distant, like the city belongs to another realm altogether. The gardeners gather at the central platform. They don't take roll call or give orders. Each seems to know where to go by instinct. You realize this must be what happens when a routine is carried through generations. Knowledge becomes rhythm, and rhythm becomes identity. One woman hums a low tune as she fills her jar from the irrigation trough. Another joins her, then another, until their voices blend into a quiet harmony. It isn't a song for performance. just a pulse that matches the creaking of wooden wheels and the splashing of water. The melody loops endlessly, soothing and circular, as if it could go on forever. You move among them, trying to follow their pattern. Each gardener seems to have a zone, a set of terraces or planters they know intimately. There's the man who trims vines, the woman who tends herbs, the young boy who checks for leaks in the channels. They move in gentle repetition, hands and feet guided more by memory than thought. A young gardener, barely more than 16, glances at you and grins. "You walk like a visitor," he says, teasing. "You need to learn the garden's tempo." You raise an eyebrow. "And what tempo is that?" He pauses, thinking. "The one between heartbeat and water," he answers, and goes back to work. You laugh quietly, unsure what he means, but somehow understanding it anyway. You wander toward the section where vines hang thick and heavy with flowers. The gardener there, an older man with skin like bronze and eyes bright as sunlight, works methodically, checking each stem. "Everything breathes together here," he tells you, not looking up. "The roots speak through the soil. The water listens. Even we listen." He gestures for you to crouch beside him. "Put your hand here," he says, pointing toward the ground near the vine base. You press your palm against the soil. It's warm near the surface, but cool just beneath, almost pulsing with moisture. "The soil tells you when it's happy," he says, not by words, by feeling. You sit back and smile. "That's poetic." He chuckles. "No, that's survival." As he moves on, you notice the way the plants seem to lean subtly toward him, as though drawn by his familiarity. It reminds you of what one of the women said the day before, that the palms bend toward song. Maybe they do. Historians still argue whether ancient gardeners believed plants responded to music or vibration. But it seems clear these Babylonians already knew something modern science is only rediscovering. Attention itself can make things grow. You follow the sound of another song drifting from a higher terrace. It's the same slow rhythm, half lullaby, half work chant. As you climb, you pass through patches of fennel, lavender, and thyme, their scents layering into something almost dizzying. Bees hum lazily between the flowers, moving like tiny, drowsy workers of their own. At the top, a group of gardeners gathers around a shallow pool. One of them kneels to clean the surface, skimming off leaves with a palm frond. The water mirrors the morning light, fractured into dozens of golden ripples. You crouch beside the pool and look down. The reflection of the terraces stretches infinitely below you, a cascade of green spilling toward the horizon. "Every day begins like this," says one gardener, a soft-spoken woman with dark eyes. "We start with the water. The garden remembers the first drop." You watch her trace her fingers through the pool, drawing faint circles that spread outward. "You believe the garden remembers?" you ask. She nods, eyes half closed. "Everything remembers something. The trick is listening long enough to hear what it says." You think of your own world, how rarely anyone pauses to listen. The thought feels heavy in your chest, like a small stone settling. The sun rises higher, painting the leaves in liquid gold. The gardeners spread across the terraces again. You notice how their tasks overlap seamlessly. While one waters, another prunes, another clears debris. The rhythm is communal, like an orchestra without a conductor. Then, a sound interrupts the harmony, a sharp snap, followed by a frustrated sigh. You turn to see the young gardener again, staring at a broken irrigation pipe. He mutters something under his breath and shakes his head. You walk over, crouching beside him. "Problem?" He gestures to the crack. "Clay's dried too fast. The water pressure split it again." He pulls a strip of linen from his belt, soaking it in wet clay. "We patch it every few days, but," he shrugs, "the garden drinks more than we can pour." Together, you help him mold the clay into the crack. The texture is sticky and cool, like thick dough. "Doesn't it get tiring?" you ask. He smiles. "Only if you think of it as fixing. I think of it as feeding." You both sit back, watching the patch dry. The boy tosses a small pebble into the nearby pool, watching the ripples spread. "My father worked here," he says quietly, "and his father before him. They say the king built this for love, but love is nothing if no one tends it after." That sentence lingers in your mind. Love is nothing if no one tends it after. You walk on, past a row of stone columns wrapped in climbing ivy. Birds dart in and out, their feathers flashing silver in the sunlight. The city below hums faintly, like a forgotten dream. The higher you climb, the more distant it feels, until even Babylon itself seems small compared to the living world above it. As the morning passes into midday, the rhythm shifts. The songs fade, the movement slow. The gardeners begin to rest in shaded alcoves. Some lie on mats woven from reeds, others lean against walls, eyes half closed. You realize how even their rest is ritualized, quiet, unhurried, folded neatly into the day's pattern. You sit beside them, feeling the faint vibration of water flowing through the channels beneath. It's a strange comfort, like the heartbeat of the garden. Someone passes around a bowl of pomegranate seeds. You take a handful. The juice bursts between your teeth, tart and sweet at once. A young woman laughs softly. "We eat what the garden gives," she says. "Tomorrow it gives something else, never too much of one thing." You nod, thinking of balance, of how everything here seems designed not for abundance, but harmony. Even the overgrown vines are trimmed back before they can dominate the others. Nothing hoards, nothing rushes. In the distance, a bronze bell rings faintly, the signal for afternoon tasks. The gardeners rise, stretch, and scatter once again, moving like notes in a song, returning to its chorus. You follow them to the lower terraces, where they begin to harvest herbs. Bundles of rosemary, mint, and sage are laid out in the sun to dry. The air fills with fragrance so thick you could almost taste it. One of the gardeners offers you a handful of dried petals. For scent, he says, to keep flies away, and maybe the bad dreams too. You tuck them into your pocket, amused. Do they work? He grins. If you believe they do. By late afternoon, the sunlight turns honey gold. Shadows stretch long, weaving through the leaves like silk ribbons. The songs fade completely now. The only sound is the steady dripping of the irrigation channels, slower and slower as the day winds down. You find yourself sitting on a stone bench at the terrace's edge. Below, the city glows in the amber light, and for a moment it's hard to tell where the gardens end and the world begins. The young gardener's words echo in your head again. Love is nothing if no one tends it after. You think about how this wonder, soaked in legend, shrouded in mystery, survived not through grand gestures, but through the patient rhythm of ordinary people. People who woke before dawn, who patched pipes, who sang to vines. And you can't help but smile. Maybe paradise has always been less about divine perfection and more about daily maintenance. The last of the sunlight glints across the water, and the garden exhales. The next day dawns hazy and gold, the kind of light that feels soft enough to touch. From your terrace perch, the city of Babylon stretches beneath you. Flat rooftops, temple spires, and that ever-glinting silver thread of the Euphrates winding lazily through the plain. Somewhere below, a chorus of oxen groans to life, wooden wheels begin to turn, and the great heart of the hanging gardens starts beating again. You follow the sound, deep, rhythmic, like a drum muffled under layers of stone, and descend through a narrow passage that winds toward the base of the terraces. The air cools the deeper you go, carrying a damp scent of clay and water. You realize this is where the real magic happens, not among the flowers above, but in the shadows below. The passage opens into a wide chamber supported by thick brick arches. Light seeps in through narrow shafts, illuminating the machinery of the garden. Enormous wooden wheels, their rims studded with clay buckets. A team of oxen trudges in slow circles, hooves clopping on packed earth, turning an axle that drives the wheels. Each revolution lifts water upward, one bucket at a time, pouring it into channels that snake toward the terraces above. You stand transfixed, watching the ancient hydraulics at work. The rhythm is hypnotic. Creak, splash, turn, pour. Creak, splash, turn, pour. The sound alone could put anyone to sleep, if not for the raw awe of realizing you're looking at one of history's earliest feats of mechanical engineering. A worker nearby, barefoot, sweat gleaming on his back, glances up and grins. "She's thirsty today," he says, nodding toward the wheel. "The air drinks faster than the roots can keep up." You step closer. The wood is worn smooth from constant motion, darkened by years of water and sun. The buckets rise and spill in an endless chain, each one perfectly timed to the next. You can't help wondering how they figured this all out. Historians still argue whether these lifts were powered by men, oxen, or an early form of screw mechanism, perhaps even predating Archimedes by centuries. But seeing it here, in the flickering half-light, you realize it doesn't matter which version is true. What matters is that it worked. Day after day, season after season, these wheels kept paradise alive. You reach out to touch the rim of one wheel as it passes, the vibration traveling through your fingers like a pulse. It's oddly soothing, steady, certain, alive. A man tending the oxen calls out something in Akkadian, and the animals slow their pace. He gestures for you to follow him along a narrow walkway beside the wheel. The passage slopes upward, tracing the flow of water through clay-lined channels that climb toward daylight. King Nebuchadnezzar commands the water, the man says with a smile that suggests he's half joking, half believing, but we are the ones who make it climb. You pass small alcoves where other workers sit, repairing buckets, sealing cracks with resin and bitumen. The smell is sharp and tar-like. One of them looks up and says, "Every drop wants to escape. Our job is to convince it otherwise." The line makes you chuckle. You imagine a drop of Euphrates water grumbling as it's hoisted skyward, muttering about unfair labor conditions. Further up, a narrow channel carries the freshly lifted water toward the terraces. It gurgles softly, spilling over small stone weirs designed to slow its flow. The surface glitters, mirroring the slanted sunlight streaming through vents overhead. You crouch beside it, mesmerized by how such an ancient system feels so modern. The way it regulates pressure, recycles overflow, distributes evenly, it's like the hydraulic equivalent of mindfulness. No part wasted, no energy lost. The worker beside you dips his hand into the channel and flicks a few drops toward his face. "She keeps us cool too," he says, smiling. "A fair trade." You continue following the water until the passage opens once again into light. You emerge onto the lower terrace where it pools briefly before being divided into smaller irrigation lines. A series of clay valves, primitive but effective, redirects the flow depending on what the plants need most that day. You can't help but admire how the system mirrors the human body. Arteries, veins, circulation, all working in harmony. As you walk, a thought crosses your mind. Maybe the true wonder of the Hanging Gardens wasn't the beauty, but the infrastructure, the unseen network that kept it alive. For every poet writing about its splendor, there must have been a dozen engineers, mechanics, and gardeners sweating below, keeping the illusion afloat. You pass one of them now, an elderly man sitting cross-legged by a junction, tightening a rope with practiced ease. His hands look like weathered driftwood. He glances up, gives a nod, and mutters, "Always turning, always patching." Then, almost as an afterthought, he adds, "If we stop one day, the desert takes it all back." That sentence lodges in your chest. If we stop, the desert takes it back. It feels like both a practical truth and a quiet prophecy. He gestures for you to sit beside him. "This work," he says, "never ends. The wheel doesn't ask for rest, only care, just like a heart." He looks at you, his gaze steady. People forget that the garden lives because we do. You nod, unsure what to say. He smiles faintly, then returns to his ropes. Nearby, two children run barefoot through the mist that rises from a leaking joint, laughing. The older one tries to catch the droplets midair. Their laughter echoes off the stone, mingling with the creak of the machinery below. You realize that even here, beneath tons of stone and soil, life finds a way to feel light. One quirky detail you notice: small clay figurines of fish and frogs are tucked into cracks along the walls. The workers placed them there for luck, believing they protect the water's flow. It's both practical and charming, a tiny army of guardians for the miracle they maintain. You touch one of the figures. Its surface is smooth, worn down by centuries of humidity and human belief. "Does it work?" you ask one of the nearby workers. He grins. "We're still here, aren't we?" You laugh quietly. Fair point. The light shifts as the day deepens. Through a narrow opening, you can see a sliver of blue sky. You follow it upward, climbing another ramp until you emerge back into the warmth of the terrace. The sound of the machinery fades behind you, replaced by the soft chatter of leaves in the breeze. You glance back toward the shadowed chamber. It feels oddly sacred down there. Not like a temple exactly, but something close. The workers may never be immortalized in stone reliefs or royal decrees, yet their devotion sustains one of the world's wonders. You walk to the edge of the terrace and look down at the city again. The Euphrates glimmers far below, endless and patient. You realize that every drop of water lifted into these gardens began there, drawn up by sweat and willpower, only to fall again as mist and rain, completing the cycle. Historians still argue whether the hanging gardens ever truly existed, or whether they were a poetic vision borrowed from older cities like Nineveh. But standing here, with the smell of wet clay still clinging to your skin and the echo of creaking wheels behind you, it's hard to believe it could have been anything but real. You close your eyes and listen one last time. The sounds blend together. The machinery below, the wind through the leaves, the faint hum of insects. It's a perfect loop of creation and care, like a heartbeat inside stone. When you open your eyes again, the sun has tilted westward. Shadows stretch long across the terraces, and the gardeners are beginning their evening rounds. You notice how they pause occasionally to glance toward the base of the structure, perhaps silently thanking the unseen workers below. It's easy to romanticize paradise as effortless beauty, but the truth, you think, is even more beautiful. Paradise is maintenance. The quiet, constant rhythm of hands and hearts keeping something alive that shouldn't exist here at all. You watch the light ripple across the water one last time before stepping away. Behind you, the great wheels turn on, indifferent to your leaving. The garden breathes, drinks, and endures. And the desert, for now, waits patiently beyond the walls. The morning comes softly, like a breath over still water. The air above the terraces carries a faint chill before the day's heat takes hold, and a thin silver mist curls up from the damp leaves. You rise before sunrise, when the sky is still a pale indigo, and the city of Babylon below you lies quiet, except for a few distant calls of merchants beginning their long day. Here in the hanging gardens, the world feels suspended between waking and dreaming. A narrow stairway spirals upward to the higher terraces. Your sandals scrape against the brick as you climb, carrying a shallow clay bowl filled with date palm resin, a gift for sealing the irrigation channels. Above you, you hear the whispering sounds of others already at work. Soft splashes, the rustle of palm fronds, the low hum of voices greeting the day. When you reach the upper level, the gardens spread before you like a green maze. Rows of pomegranate trees form living corridors, their branches heavy with pale red buds. Beyond them, the air glimmers with drifting droplets of water, freshly drawn from the system below. It feels like walking through a dream of rain. You're not alone. Dozens of gardeners move quietly among the terraces, each performing their task with the care of ritual. Some sweep fallen petals into woven baskets. Others carry long-handled jars, pouring measured amounts of water into earthen channels. There's no shouting, no rush, only the rhythm of maintenance, steady and sure. An older man with sun-darkened skin and a linen wrap tied around his head beckons you closer. His name is Bel Atiru, one of the master gardeners. You've seen him before, though he rarely speaks unless necessary. Today, he gestures toward a patch of withered leaves near the base of a fig tree. "Too much sun," he murmurs. His voice is slow, gravelly, almost gentle. "They drink too fast in this heat. Shade them, or they'll tire." You kneel beside him. The soil is dry and cracked at the edges, the color of baked bread. Together, you heap damp reeds around the trunk, creating a small canopy that shields the roots. He nods approvingly. "Good," he says. "We listen before we fix. Plants complain quietly, but they do complain." You smile at that. There's a quiet poetry in his words. The idea that even leaves can murmur if one only listens closely enough. As the sun climbs, the terrace begins to shimmer with light. The shadows of vines fall across the brick in curling patterns. A pair of doves flutters down to drink from a shallow pool. Their reflection ripples with each cautious sip. You take a wooden rake and begin smoothing the soil near the herb beds. Mint, coriander, and cumin grow here in neat rows, their scents thick in the warm air. Every motion feels deliberate, almost meditative. You can hear the faint clink of pottery from a nearby gardener mixing new soil, crushed limestone, river silt, and composted palm fibers. The mixture smells faintly sweet, like damp fruit. A small group of women nearby tends to the climbing vines that hang from the stone balustrade. They tie fresh shoots with strips of flax, talking in hushed tones about the coming festival. One hums a melody under her breath, a tune so soft you can barely make out the words. It sounds like a lullaby, the kind sung to children, or perhaps here to plants. Every so often, one of them pauses to wipe her brow and glance toward the horizon. From this height, you can see the whole sweep of Babylon, the walls gleaming, the temple of Marduk rising like a golden tower, the river cutting through it all like a line of blue silk. Beyond that, only the endless yellow plain, trembling in the heat. It's easy to forget that these gardens exist in defiance of that desert. Every leaf, every drop of water is a small rebellion against the dry expanse beyond the city. By mid-morning, the air grows heavier, fragrant with sap and resin. A gardener passes by carrying a long branch studded with drying gourds. He nods politely and begins hanging them along the beams overhead, future containers for water, seeds, and perhaps even shade. You wander toward the next terrace level, where the plants grow wilder and more exotic. There are papyrus stalks from Egypt, roses from Persia, and tamarisk trees from the distant valleys of the Levant. Each species has its own needs, its own rhythm of life. Near the edge, a young apprentice is brushing dust from the broad leaves of a banana tree. He does it slowly, reverently, using a cloth dampened with scented water. You ask him why. "So they can breathe," he replies simply. "The dust makes them heavy." He dips the cloth again, wringing it gently. "The queen likes this one," he adds. "She says its shade smells like home." You recall hearing stories, how the hanging gardens were built by King Nebuchadnezzar for Queen Amytis, who missed the green mountains of her youth. Perhaps that's why so many mountain plants grow here, far from their natural soil. The entire garden might be an act of longing, a monument to homesickness. You move closer to the banana tree, touching the edge of one leaf. It's cool and smooth beneath your fingers, despite the heat. For a moment, you understand what the queen must have felt, a kind of quiet ache soothed only by greenery. As noon approaches, the gardeners take a brief rest. You sit with them in the shade of a date palm, sharing water and flatbread. The sound of trickling water is everywhere, a steady accompaniment to your meal. Someone passes around a clay jar of fermented fig juice, and laughter follows. It's not a loud laughter, but soft, the kind that feels safe. Bella Tiru sits beside you, pulling a small knife from his belt to trim a stray vine. "This place," he says, is not for the gods, though they may visit. It is for people, to remind them of coolness when the world burns. You nod. He looks out over the terraces and adds, "Even the king forgets sometimes that plants grow slower than his orders." His eyes glint with quiet amusement. But the earth listens only to patience. When the break ends, you return to work. You kneel beside a bed of lotus flowers floating in a shallow pool. Their petals open slowly in the heat, revealing centers the color of sunrise. You scoop away debris and adjust a small clay valve to keep the water level steady. The surface ripples, reflecting the sky above, blue and endless. The rest of the afternoon passes in gentle repetition, watering, pruning, dusting, listening. Each small task feels sacred, part of a larger harmony you can't quite see but deeply feel. The scent of jasmine begins to thicken as the light softens, and for a while you simply sit beside the pool, letting the rhythm of the place wash over you. You notice a bee land on the rim of your bowl. It drinks, then drifts lazily toward a cluster of blossoms. The air hums faintly with the sound of its wings. By sunset, the sky turns to amber. The gardeners finish their work, leaving the terraces quieter. From below, the sound of the great water wheels continues, steady as breathing. The leaves gleam under the fading light, and the whole garden seems to sigh, as if settling into sleep. You linger for a while longer, sweeping fallen petals into the channels, watching them drift away. The first stars begin to appear, faint and distant. The city lights flicker below, like scattered embers. As you prepare to leave, you take one last look at the terraces. The vines, the palms, the pools, all alive because of so many gentle, unseen hands. You realize that the real beauty of the hanging gardens isn't in their grandeur, but in this daily devotion, the simple, patient act of care. You close your eyes, breathing in the mingled scent of soil, resin, and flowers. Somewhere below, a wheel turns. Somewhere above, a bird settles in for the night. And for a moment, everything feels perfectly balanced. The desert held at bay, paradise maintained one drop of water at a time. By the next morning, the air feels different. Still warm, but heavier somehow, as though the sky itself is pausing to think. You wander the upper terraces with your hands still wet from rinsing clay from your fingers. The sound of dripping water echoes down through the stone vaults beneath your feet, steady and hypnotic, like a heartbeat you can almost sink your breath to. You pass rows of fig trees and palms, the leaves trembling faintly in the light breeze. You've come to love the quiet patterns of this place, the same paths, the same pools, the same turns of shade and sun. But today, as you sit beneath a grapevine, you can't help wondering how much of what you've seen will be remembered. Below you, the great city of Babylon stretches out like a map, walls, gates, and the glint of the river winding through its heart. Beyond that, endless plains fade into the horizon. You think about how strange it is, this miracle of green suspended over sand. People will talk about it for centuries, surely, but will they believe it? A young scholar from the temple approaches, robes trailing behind him. You've seen him before. He sometimes comes here to take notes for the priests who want every detail of the irrigation system recorded. He sits beside you, balancing a wax tablet on his knees, and smiles in greeting. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he says. His voice carries the accent of someone not born here. Maybe Assyrian, maybe from further north. Almost too beautiful. Some days I think it must be a story we've all agreed to pretend is real. You glance at him, amused. "You're sitting in it," you point out. "It's quite real." He grins. "Yes, but imagine, one day this might vanish. The water stops, the bricks crumble, and what's left? A story about a king and a mountain of gardens." You look around at the vines climbing toward the sun, the scent of mint in the air, the faint hum of bees near the lotus pools. It's difficult to picture this place as anything but eternal. Yet his words settle in your mind like dust. "Historians still argue whether the gardens were ever here at all," he continues, scratching notes into his tablet. Some say they were built in Babylon, others insist they were in Nineveh. One scholar swore they were imagined entirely, nothing but a poetic metaphor for fertility. He chuckles softly. Can you imagine that? A whole city dreaming the same dream. You smile, half to yourself. Then we're all part of a dream that smells strongly of compost. He laughs, the sound sharp and light against the muffled hum of the garden. A fair point, he admits. But remember, truth has a way of wilting faster than memory. People will believe the story that sounds most pleasing. You consider that as you rise and begin to walk again, trailing your hand along the leaves of a fig tree. It's a thought that feels too modern for this ancient place, that one day travelers might come to Babylon and search for something that was never there, or see ruins and imagine flowers. Maybe they'll stand by the river and picture this very terrace floating somewhere above the haze. The scholar follows you, still speaking. They say King Sennacherib built something like this in Nineveh long before Nebuchadnezzar. The tablets describe water lifted by screws, terraces, trees brought from far away. Perhaps we've simply confused the kings. You pause near a fountain that splashes lazily into a round basin. The water smells faintly of limestone and thyme. So you think these gardens belong to someone else's memory? He shrugs. Or perhaps to everyone's. The idea of a green mountain rising above a desert, that's an image too powerful not to exist somewhere. Maybe it grows again in each generation, wherever people need a little shade. You find that comforting in a strange way. The notion that beauty doesn't need to be pinned to one place or one time, that it travels, reshapes itself, survives through telling. A breeze sweeps across the terrace, rustling the leaves. For a moment, the vines ripple like waves, the light glinting between them. You can almost believe the garden itself is breathing, listening to your conversation. The scholar rises, brushing dust from his robe. Anyway, he says, it's my job to record the facts. But the facts don't always agree with each other. The king says one thing, the priests another, and the workers, they tell the truth in their own quiet way. You grin, which is that it's hard work keeping paradise alive. He laughs again and makes his way down the steps, his sandals scuffing softly. You watch him go, feeling a strange mix of amusement and melancholy. You turn toward the fountain again and crouch beside it, dipping your fingers into the cool water. Its ripples distort your reflection, your face blending with sky, leaf, and brick. You wonder what kind of stories will be told of you, the unseen gardener. Probably none. Maybe that's the point. Paradise doesn't need witnesses. Behind you, Bel Itiru's voice calls out. He's kneeling near a cracked channel, inspecting the flow. You hurry to help, kneeling beside him. Together, you press new clay into the seam, sealing the leak. He works silently for a while, then glances at you. You've got the scholar's look, he says. Too much thinking, not enough watering. You laugh softly. He says one day this might all be a legend. Bel Itiru grunts. Let it. Legends are lighter to carry than buckets of water. You smile, smoothing the clay. Do you care if people remember? He leans back, squinting at the horizon. No, the plants don't care who built the wall. They just need the sun, the water, and the hand that listens. That quiet wisdom lingers in the air long after he moves on. You sit there a while, watching sunlight flicker through the leaves, watching dragonflies dart between blossoms. The notion of existence itself feels fragile, like a reflection that might vanish if you look too hard. Later in the day, a small group of visitors arrives, nobles from distant lands. They murmur in awe, pointing upward at the tiers of greenery. One of them says something you barely catch. I heard this place can be seen from miles away, an emerald mountain rising from the sand. Another replies, if it weren't for the heat, I'd think it a dream. You smile faintly, returning to your work. The garden doesn't need to defend its reality. It simply exists. As the afternoon deepens, a faint haze begins to blur the horizon. You think of the stories that will grow from this place, each retelling adding a new leaf, a new shadow, a new drop of imagined water. Maybe that's what immortality looks like. Not marble statues or inscriptions, but whispers that refuse to fade. You finish watering the lotus bed, watching the ripples spread outward. The light catches them, scattering gold. You lean back on your heels and breathe deeply, filling your lungs with the scent of soil and sunlight. Somewhere below, the water wheels continue their endless turning. Somewhere far in the future, perhaps no one will hear them. But maybe, if someone listens carefully, they'll still feel the rhythm, the slow, patient heartbeat of a garden that may or may not have existed. And that, you decide, is enough. The morning sunlight drifts lazily across the terraces, turning the leaves into gold-green mosaics that shift with every gust of wind. You move among the flowers, inhaling the gentle perfume that seems to rise from the earth itself, a mixture of jasmine, mint, and something more elusive, perhaps the faint sweetness of crushed date palms. The air is quiet, except for the soft trickle of water from the channels, a sound so constant that it begins to blend with your heartbeat. You kneel beside a cluster of roses, noting the delicate gradation of color from creaming ivory at the edges of each petal to deep crimson near the center. You run a fingertip along a curve, marveling at how something so fragile can survive here, high above the desert floor. The petals feel impossibly soft, almost translucent. Somewhere below, the water hums over a small weir, its constant movement mirrored by the rhythm of your own motions. Nearby, a gardener, an older woman with silver-streaked hair tied into a braid, works quietly, clipping brown tips from the tulip bed. She glances at you without speaking. Instead, she points toward a tiny bud hiding among the leaves. Some flowers, she says finally, hide their colors until they trust you. You lean closer, squinting at the bud. It's small, almost imperceptible, yet you can see a faint blush starting at the tip. "Trust me?" you ask softly. She smiles, a small, knowing curl of her lips. "They have secrets," she says, "and only patience will coax them out." You spend the next hour tending to her section, pruning, dusting, checking soil moisture. Each plant seems to respond to the careful touch, leaves brightening, stems perking, as if aware of the attention. A dragonfly flits past, its wings catching the sunlight and scattering tiny rainbows across the stone. You follow it with your eyes, marveling at its speed and precision, then return to the flowers, noticing subtler movements, the gentle curling of a petal, the slow unfurling of a fern. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians truly cultivated exotic flowers from distant lands, or whether chroniclers exaggerated their rarity. But here, among the terraces, the distinction doesn't matter. Every bloom seems exotic, every scent a small miracle of survival and care. As you move to a patch of lilies, a child gardener approaches, holding a basket filled with crushed herbs. "We mix these with water," he says proudly, "so the flowers grow strong and smell sweeter." He dips a handful of the mix into a shallow watering trough, allowing the fragrant liquid to seep into the roots. You bend down, inhaling the combined aroma. It's potent, almost dizzying, yet comforting in its complexity. A bee lands on a lily, oblivious to your presence. Its tiny wings vibrate rapidly, creating a subtle hum that blends with the gentle splashes of the water channels. You watch as it navigates from flower to flower, the smallest of workers among the grandest of gardens. There is a strange poetry in its dedication, each movement precise, purposeful, essential. You wander further, past vines of climbing jasmine that twist and spiral around stone columns. Their blooms hang like tiny lanterns, filling the terrace with a soft, sweet fragrance. You pause, brushing your fingers against a cluster of blooms, releasing a puff of pollen that drifts lazily into the air. The scent carries, mingling with the resin of nearby date palms and the faint tang of river water. It's intoxicating in its subtlety, grounding yet slightly dizzying. A gardener kneels nearby, whispering softly to a patch of papyrus. "Words do not travel far here," he murmurs, "but attention does." You realize he means the same thing Bella Tiru said about listening to the plants, that care is a language in itself. You spend a long moment studying the papyrus, its stems swaying gently in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a small fountain spills over its stone edge. You bend down, splashing water onto the roots of a nearby bed of mint. The droplets glint in the sunlight, reflecting tiny prisms of color onto your hands. The sound is subtle, delicate, a lullaby in miniature. Nearby, another gardener has started trimming vines of wisteria that drape from a wooden trellis. You watch the slow, methodical snip of the scissors, the careful folding of the cut branches, the precise placement of each stem. The motion is mesmerizing, hypnotic almost, and you find your breathing syncing with it, slow and even. A curious thought occurs to you. The flowers, the vines, the trees, they are all thriving because of this quiet devotion, the invisible labor of dozens of hands working in perfect harmony. The plants themselves hold their secrets, ways to survive heat, drought, wind, and human interference. But only those who pay attention can coax them into revealing those secrets. You remember the silver-haired woman's words about trust. Perhaps this is what the hanging gardens are really about, a place where patience is rewarded, where attention and care unlock hidden beauty. Even the smallest plants, you realize, have personalities, preferences, and moods. A neglected stem wilts, a tended one blooms. The garden is alive in ways that are subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable if you're willing to watch. A breeze picks up, carrying the faint sound of the city below, merchants shouting, the bray of donkeys, temple bells ringing. You close your eyes and let it mingle with the hum of the bees, the splash of the water, and the gentle whisper of leaves. For a moment, the city's chaos feels distant, irrelevant. All that matters is this terrace, these flowers, the rhythm of tending. You move to a small pond filled with lotus flowers. Some buds have begun to open fully, petals spreading like delicate sails. You kneel beside them, adjusting the water level so that the roots remain submerged, but the flowers float freely. A small frog jumps from one leaf to another, disappearing into the shadow beneath the blooms. The sound of its splash is tiny, but in the quiet, it echoes like a drumbeat. Historians debate whether lotus flowers in Babylon were purely decorative or held symbolic significance, representing creation, rebirth, or divine beauty. You decide it doesn't matter here. The flowers are magnificent because they simply exist, demanding nothing beyond care and attention. You step back to take it all in. The terraces layered like green steps toward the sky, vines twisting around columns, pools reflecting light and cloud, flowers opening and closing in a rhythm older than memory. Somewhere above, a bird calls. Somewhere below, water rushes through the channels, unseen but essential. For a long time, you simply walk, kneel, and tend. Every motion is gentle, deliberate, a dialogue between hands and earth. Each flower, each leaf seems to respond to the quiet care, opening slightly more, standing a little taller, breathing life into the terrace. And as the sun begins its slow descent, painting the garden in honeyed gold, you realize what makes the hanging gardens magical. It isn't the grandeur, or the exotic plants, or even the mystery surrounding their existence. It is this, the intimate, patient, and unhurried attention given to every stem, every petal, every leaf. Even in the face of the desert outside, the gardens survive. Even if no one ever records every detail, the flowers remember the care they receive, and, in return, they bloom. The sun has barely risen when you return to the garden, the early light casting long shadows across the terraces. There's a dampness in the air, a quiet promise of the day's work. You wander toward a lower terrace, where the soil seems almost alive beneath your feet, dark and fragrant, a mixture of river silt, crushed clay, and organic matter. The gardeners are already at work, moving in a slow, deliberate rhythm, hands brushing through the earth, checking for moisture and compaction. You kneel beside a freshly turned bed of herbs, letting your fingers sink into the cool soil. You close your eyes and inhale deeply. The scent is earthy and sweet, carrying a faint trace of citrus from nearby lemon trees. There's something intimate about this moment, as though the ground itself is aware of your presence, accepting your touch, your attention. A gardener, middle-aged, with hands like weathered driftwood, kneels beside you. He is mixing a small batch of compost, a blend of ash, crushed reeds, and the occasional scraps of food collected from the palace kitchens. "The soil tells us everything," he murmurs, speaking more to the earth than to you. "If you listen, you know when it's tired, when it wants water, when it craves the warmth of sun or shade." You watch him carefully, fascinated by the subtle gestures, a pinch of ash here, a swirl of compost there, a gentle patting of the surface to settle it without crushing the delicate roots beneath. Each movement seems rehearsed, a language of care spoken without words. Historians still argue whether Babylonian gardeners used systematic soil enrichment or relied mostly on trial and error, he continues. I say trial and care are the same thing. You nod, understanding instantly what he means. This is not just science, it is art, observation, intuition. You dip your hand into the soil, feeling the way it crumbles lightly between your fingers. There's a rhythm here, a quiet pulse that echoes the drip of water from the channels above. You can imagine ancient gardeners kneeling in this same spot, centuries ago, adjusting soil, planting seeds, coaxing life into the arid terraces. Perhaps they believed that the earth held memory, that it remembers who tends it, who neglects it, who whispers quietly while working. Nearby, a small boy is scattering seeds across a freshly tilled plot. Each grain lands precisely, a testament to years of observation and practice. The older gardener watches him, a smile touching his lips. "They remember what we teach them," he says softly, "and someday they'll teach others." You move to another terrace, where a group of gardeners is adjusting irrigation channels. Water trickles down clay conduits, feeding beds of parsley, coriander, and marjoram. Some channels are lined with crushed limestone to keep them smooth. Others are patched with resin and reeds. The work is meticulous, unglamorous, and endlessly vital. Without it, the garden above could not survive the desert sun. A quirky detail catches your eye. A small clay figurine of a cat is tucked into a corner of the soil. The gardener nearby notices your gaze. "For luck," he says simply. "Cats keep the vermin away, and sometimes they watch the plants. Never underestimate a cat's attention." You laugh softly, imagining the tiny feline guardian patrolling the herbs, its invisible vigilance contributing to the garden's survival. You kneel beside a row of marigolds, pressing your fingertips into the rich soil. The flowers sway lightly, brushing your hands, and you feel an unexpected connection, a sense of shared purpose with everything rooted here. It occurs to you that the soil itself is alive, not in the sense of moving or breathing, but in memory, in response, in a quiet understanding of care. The gardeners move with a rhythm that seems almost choreographed. One spreads compost, another checks moisture, a third trims roots. You watch, fascinated, noting the interplay of patience, observation, and instinct. A small bird alights on a branch nearby, cocking its head as if judging your efforts. You smile and continue working, mindful of its silent attention. A gentle breeze stirs, carrying the scent of wet earth, herbs, and distant blossoms. Somewhere above, the water channels ripple and glimmer in the sunlight. You imagine the layers of the garden as a living ecosystem. Each terrace, each plant, each insect dependent on careful tending. Each action echoing through the soil, the leaves, the air. One gardener pauses, brushing dirt from his hands. "The earth is honest," he says. "It rewards those who care, punishes those who neglect." You consider the simplicity of that statement. Perhaps that is why this garden survives where the desert claims everything else. Not because of grandeur or wealth, but because of constant, attentive care. You move to a shaded patch beneath a date palm, kneeling to adjust the soil around a row of small ferns. Their roots are shallow, delicate, vulnerable to drying winds. You pat the soil gently, listening to the quiet pulse beneath. The gardener watches you work. "Every hand matters," he says, "even yours." The sun climbs higher, warming your back and illuminating the terraces in a golden glow. A faint sound reaches you, the clatter of buckets being lifted, the soft murmur of other gardeners talking among themselves, and the distant rush of water from a fountain. It all blends into a steady, soothing rhythm, a lullaby for those who take the time to notice. You rise slowly, brushing your hands on your tunic, and take a moment to observe the soil one last time. Dark, rich, and full of life, it holds the memory of countless seasons, countless gardeners, and countless acts of care. Even if the gardens above were someday forgotten, the soil would remember. You glance across the terrace at a patch of lavender, its purple spikes swaying gently. Bees flit from blossom to blossom, moving with precision and purpose. Each insect, each plant, each gardener participates in a subtle, intricate dance. You realize that the hanging gardens are not merely a spectacle of greenery, but a living testament to patience, attentiveness, and quiet devotion. As the afternoon light softens, you step back and let your eyes sweep across the terraces. Water glints in channels, vines climb stone, flowers bloom in bursts of color, and the soil beneath it all holds the invisible history of every hand that ever worked here. You inhale deeply, filling your lungs with the scent of earth, water, and blossoms, feeling connected to centuries of care and to a rhythm that will continue long after you leave. And in that quiet moment, kneeling on the soil, you understand what the hanging gardens truly are. Not only a marvel of architecture or irrigation, but a living poem written in earth, water, and human devotion. The sun is climbing steadily when you step onto the narrow stairway that leads to the uppermost terraces. The air is warm, but softened by the gentle humidity rising from the channels below. Each step carries you higher into the suspended paradise, the scent of flowers and wet stone intensifying as you ascend. The terraces above feel more secluded, almost secret, as if they are the garden's private chambers, reserved for those willing to climb and observe closely. You pause, midway, leaning against the railing, listening to the soft chorus of water spilling from one terrace to another. It creates a rhythm, both soothing and mesmerizing, a constant pulse that resonates through your bones. Somewhere below, the great wheels continue to turn, their creaking and splashing forming a backdrop to the life above. You breathe deeply, letting the scents and sounds wrap around you like a soft blanket. As you reach the next level, the variety of plants becomes more pronounced. Vines of jasmine climb twisting columns, their blooms heavy with fragrance. Clusters of roses lean toward the sunlight, delicate petals shifting in the breeze. Small papyrus pools reflect the sky, lilies floating lazily on the surface. You kneel beside a pool, dipping a finger into the water, and notice how the reflection of the sky ripples with every movement. It's easy to imagine that each terrace is a miniature world, complete with its own rhythm, temperature, and personality. A gardener approaches, balancing a basket of freshly cut herbs. He greets you quietly, nodding as he passes. "The upper terraces are trickier," he says softly. "Wind and sun play differently here. We have to be careful. Even a little mistake and a plant can wilt before anyone notices." You walk alongside him, observing the meticulous attention with which he tends the plants. He adjusts a vine that has strayed from its support, gently tying it to the trellis with strips of flax. The motion is careful, deliberate, almost meditative. You realize that this terrace demands not only skill, but intuition, an ability to read the subtle cues of the environment and the plants themselves. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians imported exotic plants to achieve this variety or relied on local species arranged with imagination. Here, it hardly matters. The terrace feels alive, a symphony of colors, textures, and scents that speaks of patience and dedication more than any geographic record. You pause near a fig tree whose branches stretch across the terrace. Its leaves glint with dew from the irrigation channels, and a cluster of figs begins to ripen in the sun. The gardener instructs you to gently remove a few leaves that are blocking sunlight from reaching the lower branches. You comply, noticing how small adjustments can have a significant impact on growth. It's a lesson in subtlety. The smallest touch can change the life of a plant, and perhaps, in turn, the mood of the terrace. Nearby, a small bird flits from branch to branch, cautiously inspecting the flowers and pools. It lands briefly on the rim of a basin, drinking carefully before taking off again. The sound of its wings combines with the soft trickle of water, creating a meditative rhythm. You lean against a column, letting your attention drift across the terrace. Every detail, the shine of wet leaves, the shimmer of sunlight on petals, the faint scent of herbs carried by the wind, feels heightened by your proximity. A small clay figurine of a fish is tucked into a corner of the terrace, partially hidden beneath a bush. The gardener notices your glance and smiles. "For luck," he says simply. "We place them where water gathers, to remind it to flow kindly." You chuckle at the quaint charm, thinking of the centuries-old superstition quietly sustaining life alongside irrigation and soil management. You continue upward, reaching the final terrace. Here, the light is brighter, the air warmer, and the panorama of the city below stretches endlessly. The Euphrates gleams like a silver ribbon, the rooftops of Babylon forming geometric patterns that seem almost unreal from this height. Beyond the city, the desert stretches flat and unyielding, its yellow sands a stark contrast to the lush terraces beneath your feet. The garden feels impossibly fragile and yet impossibly resilient, a triumph of human care over the arid landscape. You kneel to tend a patch of lotus flowers near the edge. The petals glisten with morning dew, and you notice tiny insects moving along the leaves. Each interaction is subtle. Brush a leaf too hard, and the water shifts, disturbing the plant. Adjust a stem too carelessly, and the flower tilts away from the sun. Every movement requires thought, patience, and attention. Historians debate how the terraces were supported, whether stone or mud brick carried the weight of soil, water, and life above. Some suggest sophisticated hydraulic engineering was essential, while others imagine more modest methods. Standing here, seeing the balance between plants, water, and stone, you can appreciate both perspectives. The engineering is ingenious, but the devotion of hands and minds is equally critical. You glance across the terrace at a cluster of roses, their petals curling gently in the wind. You kneel to adjust a few leaves, brushing away debris and checking the moisture of the soil. The gardener beside you hums quietly, a tune that seems to fit the rhythm of the terrace itself. It is easy to get lost in this combination of sound, scent, and motion, to forget the city below or the desert beyond. Time passes slowly. Sunlight shifts, shadows stretch, and you notice subtle changes in the plants. The way the jasmine leans toward light, the hint of new buds forming on the vines, the way lotus flowers tilt as if sensing the approaching warmth of afternoon. Each detail is a small miracle, evidence of life persisting in a delicate balance. You rise to your feet and take a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle movement of air across the terraces. From this vantage point, the garden seems almost eternal, yet you are reminded that every moment of care, every adjustment of soil or water is essential to that appearance of permanence. And as you stand there, surrounded by the quiet hum of growth, you realize that the true wonder of the upper terraces lies not just in their height or their beauty, but in the meticulous, invisible work that keeps them alive. The garden exists because of constant attention, patient hands, and subtle understanding. Each step you take, each flower you touch, is part of a rhythm older than memory, a testament to the quiet devotion that transforms soil, stone, and water into paradise. The morning begins with the low, steady clatter of water wheels turning in the courtyards below. You follow the sound upward, tracing it along the terraces until it fills the air around you. It is constant, rhythmic, a mechanical heartbeat sustaining the life above. The irrigation system is the hidden spine of the hanging gardens, an intricate network of channels, cisterns, and wheels, quietly ensuring that every plant, vine, and tree has exactly what it needs. You kneel beside one of the main channels, dipping your fingers into the cool, flowing water. It moves with a hypnotic consistency, tracing a path through clay conduits and over stone edges, turning smaller wheels along the way. Each droplet seems purposeful, directed, and alive. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians used screw pumps, bucket chains, or some other ingenious method to lift the water from the Euphrates to the top terraces. And standing here, you can almost imagine all of them working together, a symphony of ancient engineering. A gardener kneels nearby, balancing a long reed against the channel to guide the flow. "The water is alive too," he says softly, as though revealing a secret. "It listens if you guide it properly. Too much force, and it resists. Too little, and it doesn't reach where it's needed." You watch him tilt the reed just so, and the water responds immediately, arcing gracefully into a bed of marigolds. It's mesmerizing to see the liquid obeying subtle gestures, the tangible power of patience and observation. You move along the terrace, checking smaller side channels that feed lotus pools and herb beds. A small clay valve allows you to divert water into a shallow basin, creating a delicate waterfall that shimmers in the sunlight. The hum of flowing water is constant, but it carries an almost musical quality, a faint, meditative melody that seems to echo through the garden itself. Nearby, a young apprentice balances a bucket of water on his shoulder, carefully pouring it into the troughs. His hands are steady, though you notice the tiniest hesitation before each pour, a mixture of reverence and nervousness. "Every drop counts," he whispers. "We can't waste any." You remember Bel Etiru's words about listening to plants. Here, you realize that philosophy extends to water as well. The liquid doesn't merely quench thirst, it communicates, directs, and nourishes. A misaligned channel can stunt a plant's growth, while careful guidance allows flowers to bloom, vines to climb, and trees to flourish. The system is subtle, almost invisible, but absolutely essential. A faint metallic glint catches your eye along one of the upper channels. A small screw-like mechanism lifts water steadily from a lower basin. You kneel to inspect it, turning it gently with your hands. Historians debate whether the Babylonians had perfected the Archimedes screw centuries before the Greeks, and whether this type of pump was common in large-scale gardens. You smile at the thought of ancient engineers tinkering, adjusting, experimenting, hands blackened with clay and water, dreaming of paradise above the desert. As you follow the flow upward, you notice the complexity of the network. Tiny side channels feed every bed, allowing gardeners to control moisture precisely. Pools at the corners collect overflow, recycling it efficiently. Even the smallest slope is calculated, ensuring water trickles naturally without drowning the roots. The ingenuity of it all is breathtaking, yet you also see the human devotion embedded in every detail. The constant vigilance, the careful observation, the patience required to sustain life high above the barren plains. You pause beside a patch of papyrus growing along a narrow channel. The stems sway gently as the water passes, their reflection shimmering in the sunlight. A gardener crouches nearby, brushing dust and sediment away to ensure the water continues flowing. "We trust the water," he murmurs. "It gives what we cannot, but we must never neglect it." A sudden breeze ripples across the terraces, stirring leaves and petals. Tiny droplets from the channels drift in the air, sparkling like suspended jewels. The scent of wet earth rises, mingling with the fragrance of flowers and herbs. You close your eyes, feeling the subtle vibration of water moving beneath your fingertips, sensing its energy, its rhythm. Even as the sun climbs higher, the water remains patient, flowing steadily despite heat, wind, or shadow. It shapes the life around it, coaxing blooms, sustaining roots, and nourishing delicate ferns. You realize that the true magic of the gardens lies not only in the plants or the terraces, but in this hidden choreography of liquid and stone, guided by human hands with skill and devotion. Nearby, the apprentice struggles with a misaligned channel. Water begins to spill over the edge, soaking the soil in unintended places. You move to assist, adjusting the clay and reeds carefully. Together, you restore the flow, and the water resumes its graceful journey. The boy looks at you with a shy smile. "It's alive," he says simply, echoing the gardener's earlier words. You nod, understanding. It's alive, yes, but it thrives only with attention. You walk further along the terrace, letting the channels guide your steps. The patterns of flow, reflection, and sound create a quiet, meditative rhythm. You notice the tiny fish in the shallow basins, moving lazily, following currents set long before you arrived. A few bees pause to drink from the surface, their wings vibrating against the still morning air. Everything here is interconnected: water, plants, insects, and people, each dependent on the other. As noon approaches, sunlight pours over the terraces, illuminating the rippling water and casting dancing reflections on walls and columns. You pause to watch, mesmerized. The irrigation system is not merely functional, it is alive, a subtle choreography of engineering and care. And you are part of it, moving gently among channels and basins, ensuring that the garden continues to thrive. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a faint argument, soft but persistent. Historians still argue about the scale of these gardens, the methods used to maintain them, and even whether they were located precisely in Babylon or elsewhere. You smile, letting their debates fade against the hum of flowing water. In this moment, it does not matter. Here, above the desert, in the soft rhythm of irrigation, the truth is tangible. Plants live because water moves, and water moves because hands tend it. And you, kneeling beside the channels, brushing soil and adjusting flow, feel the quiet satisfaction of being part of that delicate, ongoing miracle. The day has softened into a warm, gentle afternoon when you reach the fruit terraces. Sunlight spills over the vines and trees, illuminating clusters of pomegranates, figs, and grapes, each heavy with ripeness. The air carries a subtle sweetness, mingled with the tang of citrus and the earthy scent of soil still damp from morning watering. You inhale slowly, letting the mixture of aromas settle into your senses. There is a deep, quiet satisfaction in witnessing this moment, the culmination of weeks, months, perhaps years of meticulous care. You kneel beneath a low-hanging branch of pomegranate trees, brushing aside leaves to reach the ruby-red fruit. The pomegranates gleam in the sun, their skins taut, hinting at the juice inside. You twist one gently from its stem, careful not to bruise it, and place it in the woven basket at your side. Historians still argue whether the hanging gardens contained primarily ornamental plants or a balance of practical, edible crops. Whatever the case, the fruit here is undeniably real, its weight and color proof of nature's abundance. Nearby, a young apprentice is plucking figs from the upper branches, standing on tiptoe to reach the ripest clusters. A gardener passes him a long wooden hook, allowing him to safely guide the fruit down without damaging the tree. The boy's hands are sticky with sap and juice, but he moves with quiet concentration, his movements careful and deliberate. You smile at his dedication, remembering your first attempts at harvesting, clumsy and fumbling, and how quickly the master gardeners had corrected you with gentle patience. You smile at his dedication, remembering your first attempts, clumsy and fumbling, and how quickly the master gardeners had corrected you with gentle patience. You wander to a grapevine arching over a trellis. The clusters hang heavy, the grapes deep purple, almost translucent in the sunlight. You grasp a cluster and gently twist it from the vine, savoring the faint, sweet scent that rises from the tiny spheres. The vines are trained meticulously, each branch carefully supported, each leaf positioned to maximize sunlight while shielding fruit from scorching heat. You remember Belatiru's words about patience. Even the king cannot command the vines to grow faster. Only the hands who tend them can. As you move among the fruit trees, you notice a small, unexpected detail. Tiny sprigs of wild mint growing at the base of the trees. The gardener kneeling nearby points them out. Mint repels pests, he explains, and it keeps the roots happy. Nature provides if you listen carefully. You pluck a few sprigs, inhaling their fresh, invigorating aroma. Even in the cultivated heights of Babylon, clever gardeners use nature's tricks to maintain balance. You pause to admire the ingenuity of the water channels snaking between the trees. Small spouts feed basins around each root, ensuring consistent moisture. You adjust one, noticing how the water flows more evenly, pooling gently around the base of a young fig tree. A drop splashes onto your hand, cool and refreshing. You realize how much thought and care goes into every detail. The precise positioning of stones, the exact gradient of channels, the timing of watering, all choreographed to support the thriving greenery. A soft breeze stirs, carrying with it the faint hum of bees and the flutter of butterfly wings. You watch as a bee lands delicately on a grape, its tiny wings vibrating rapidly, and then moves on to another blossom. Each small creature has its role in this complex ecosystem, contributing quietly to the health of the garden. You bend to inspect a fig tree and notice a subtle difference in the soil moisture near the roots. An intuitive adjustment here, a careful nudge there, enough to keep the tree productive. Somewhere above, a vine of jasmine reaches across a wooden trellis, trailing its fragrant blooms over the fruit trees. You pause to gently guide it back along its supports, careful not to damage either the vine or the fruit below. It occurs to you that the hanging gardens are a place of constant balance, a living choreography where each element, plant, water, soil, gardener, insect, depends on subtle adjustments to thrive. You wander to the far side of the terrace, where a cluster of date palms rises high, their fronds casting long, dappled shadows. The dates are nearly ready to harvest, golden and heavy, hanging in clusters that sway gently in the wind. You reach up, selecting a bunch with care, twisting it free and letting it fall softly into your basket. The sweetness of the fruit mingles with the faint resin scent of the palm, creating a heady, almost intoxicating fragrance. A gardener nearby is trimming back excess foliage, his motions slow and deliberate, each cut calculated to maximize sunlight for the fruit and prevent overcrowding. You watch him for a while, noting how he works almost instinctively, his hands moving with quiet authority. The garden thrives because of these invisible decisions, choices made in soft whispers and gentle gestures rather than commands. As the afternoon drifts on, you pause to rest on a low stone wall. The city of Babylon stretches below, and the Euphrates gleams like molten silver in the distance. Beyond the walls, the desert seems harsh and unyielding, yet above it, the gardens thrive, a testament to human ingenuity, devotion, and patience. You close your eyes briefly, inhaling the mingled scents of earth, flowers, and ripe fruit. You begin to collect the last of the figs and pomegranates, carefully stacking them in your basket, mindful not to bruise the delicate skins. You glance around at the other gardeners, all engaged in similar tasks, moving silently, their focus absolute. A soft murmur of conversation drifts past, punctuated by the occasional laugh, but the atmosphere remains serene, almost sacred. Historians still argue whether the hanging gardens were primarily decorative or functional, and whether the fruit produced here ever fed the royal family or was symbolic of abundance. Standing among the trees and vines, it seems clear that the answer is both. Each cluster of fruit is a triumph of patience, care, and subtle artistry, a small reward for constant attention. By late afternoon, the baskets are full. The terrace is fragrant and shimmering in the warm sunlight. You take a final walk among the trees, gently brushing leaves, straightening branches, and adjusting small channels to ensure the water flows evenly. The gentle hum of irrigation wheels and the soft trickle of water channels form a background symphony, punctuated by the occasional flutter of wings or the rustle of leaves in the breeze. As the sun begins to lower toward the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the terraces, you pause to admire the fruits of your labor. The hanging gardens are alive, vibrant, and abundant, a testament not only to the plants themselves, but to the quiet dedication of the hands that tend them. You breathe in the warm, fragrant air, savoring the sweetness of ripe pomegranates, figs, and dates, and feel a deep, peaceful satisfaction in being part of this living paradise. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and rose. You walk along the highest terrace, letting the gentle breeze lift your hair and brush across your skin. The garden is bathed in warm, mellow light, each leaf and petal catching it differently, shimmering as though they are made of liquid amber. You inhale deeply, letting the scents of ripe fruit, wet earth, and jasmine mingle in your senses. There is a profound calm here, a quiet rhythm that seems to slow time itself. You pause near a small fountain at the terrace's edge, listening to the steady plash of water as it spills over stone into the basin below. The sound is hypnotic, a gentle lullaby that blends with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the city far below. A dragonfly hovers briefly above the pool, wings catching the fading light in flashes of iridescent color. You watch it, marveling at its precision, its quiet diligence, and then let it go, returning your focus to the garden itself. The last of the gardeners are moving slowly now, finishing their rounds, checking soil moisture, adjusting tiny irrigation channels, and whispering quiet instructions to apprentices. Their footsteps are soft against the stone paths, the rustle of tunics, and the gentle clink of tools forming a muted, soothing rhythm. You kneel beside a patch of lavender, brushing your fingertips along the stems, releasing its calming aroma into the air. Even the smallest gestures feel significant here, every touch a dialogue with the earth. Historians still argue about the exact methods used to sustain the hanging gardens over time. The mechanics of water, the structural engineering of terraces, and the variety of plants cultivated. But standing here, those debates fade. The truth is immediate, tangible. Life thrives when cared for, water flows when guided, and beauty persists when attention is given. You wander to a fig tree, now casting long, delicate shadows across the terrace. The ripe figs hang low, their skins warm to the touch. You pluck one carefully and taste it, the sweetness filling your mouth and grounding you in the present. The trees, the flowers, the vines, they all feel like companions, silent witnesses to the slow, patient work of tending, of watching, of being present. A small breeze stirs the lotus pool nearby, sending ripples across the water that catch the last sunlight like liquid gold. You crouch to watch a tiny frog leap from leaf to leaf, the soft splash blending seamlessly with the hum of water and insects. The garden is alive in ways both obvious and subtle, a delicate symphony of motion, scent, and sound. You pause at the topmost terrace, looking down at the layered greenery stretching toward the city below. The Euphrates glints in the dying light, a silver ribbon reflecting the pastel sky. Beyond the walls, the desert seems distant, silent, and indifferent. Yet above it, the garden persists, a testament to the devotion, patience, and care that has gone into every stone, every channel, every plant. The shadows lengthen, and the air cools slightly. You walk slowly among the vines and flowering shrubs, brushing aside leaves, checking for stray debris, adjusting a few last irrigation channels. A small bird lands nearby, flitting from branch to branch before settling on a trellis. You watch it for a moment, noticing the careful balance of its tiny body against the gentle sway of leaves. The garden is full of life, yet all movements are calm, deliberate, harmonious. A gardener approaches quietly, holding a basket of harvested fruit. He places it gently in the storage area, nods to you, and returns to his own tasks. You continue your rounds, noting the subtle interactions of plants and water, of light and shadow. The terraces are a living puzzle, each element supporting the other, each detail attended to with care. As the sun dips lower, the golden light fades into a soft twilight. The colors of the flowers deepen, petals shifting from bright hues to muted tones, leaves darkening, shadows stretching across stone and soil. The gentle hum of water channels, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional chirp of insects create a lullaby-like rhythm. You pause to inhale deeply, feeling the cool evening air mingle with the lingering warmth of the day, and allow yourself to sink into the garden's serene embrace. You crouch beside a small patch of herbs, mint, coriander, and marjoram, and brush your fingers across the leaves, feeling the subtle vibrations of life beneath your touch. Each plant responds in its own way, leaning slightly toward the sun's final rays, standing firm against the evening breeze. The garden feels aware, sentient in its quiet persistence, thriving because it is tended, observed, and loved. Historians debate whether the hanging gardens were a triumph of human engineering, a miracle of botanical ambition, or perhaps a poetic metaphor for abundance. You think of it differently. To stand here, among the terraces, with the sound of flowing water, the scent of blossoms, and the soft weight of ripe fruit in your hands, is to witness something far more immediate: the fragile, enduring harmony between nature and care, between patience and reward. You rise slowly, walking to the edge of the terrace. The city below is quieting, the river glinting faintly in the last light. The desert beyond seems calm, almost indifferent. Yet above it all, the hanging gardens remain, vivid, thriving, eternal in their quiet way. You breathe in one last deep lungful of scented air, feeling a profound sense of peace. Every step, every touch, every moment of care has contributed to this calm, this enduring beauty. And now, as the evening deepens and the stars begin to pierce the twilight, you settle into a quiet moment of reflection. The water continues to flow, the plants continue to thrive, and somewhere in the distance, a soft wind carries the fragrance of blossoms across the terraces. The garden breathes with life, patience, and attention, a gentle reminder that beauty is sustained not by grandeur, but by care, subtlety, and love. The sky darkens, softening from rose and gold to deep indigo. You find a comfortable spot beneath a fig tree, letting the weight of your days settle gently in your body. The air is cooler now, carrying the scent of wet earth, fading blossoms, and distant rivers. Everything feels slower, softer, more expansive. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythm of the water channels, the gentle sway of leaves, and the faint hum of insects. Each sound, each scent, each subtle vibration is a lullaby, coaxing your mind to rest. You imagine the garden stretching endlessly, terraces layered above terraces, vines climbing stone, flowers opening and closing in quiet cycles. The fruits of your labor hang heavy yet safe. The herbs release their calming aroma, and the lotus pools reflect the twilight sky like quiet mirrors. The garden is alive and breathing, steady, patient, unhurried, and you are part of it, even for this fleeting moment. Let go of thoughts that chase the sun's final rays or the city's distant bustle. Focus instead on the slow drip of water, the gentle sway of petals, the faint whispers of leaves. These small movements carry a profound calm. The desert beyond does not intrude here. The city's noise fades to nothing. You are surrounded by life, attention, and care. Feel the weight of the day lifting, replaced by quiet contentment. Each plant, each stream, each fruit, and each leaf rests in harmony, and so can you. Let your mind drift along the terraces, floating among vines, flowers, and pools. The hanging gardens cradle you in their serenity, a reminder that beauty is quiet, patient, and eternal in its own way. Sweet dreams.